Thank you, Ranking Member Paul. So I think this is an important issue that we have to really drill down on, so a little bit more clarification on it and picking up on the questions that Ranking Member Paul has. When he says that we have sticky prices that can't go up, that's because there are contracts, the Medicare contracts and others, which is part of capitalism. If you're a really big customer, you will negotiate for a price. That's pure capitalism, and then you lock into a contract to do that, which is part of the market. But is that the reason why we're seeing shortages? Is because we have big customers locking in contracts for a price? I'm a little concerned. In fact, in our report, the fludarabine is a drug that had a shortage here, and I see once it was in shortage, it was less than $300 a vial. Then all of a sudden, the manufacturer raised it to $2,736 per vial. I suppose, especially if you only have one manufacturer making a drug, you own that market, and the price could go right through the ceiling as well. So talk to us a little bit about price controls. Dr. Goodman talks about price controls. Are there price controls by the FDA, or are these contracts that folks who are big customers are entering into in order to have some control over the prices that consumers pay? That's usually a good way to make sure consumers are not gouged, is by having a long-term contract. Any of you can answer that. Dr. Fox, you're shaking your head.
Thanks, Senator Peters. I will say that you're exactly right with the contracting. The reason why hospitals can't pay 10 times the amount for a drug next week is because we will still only get paid our capitated rate that has been locked in for years. And so the insurance and the way that we pay for healthcare in this country really doesn't allow for prices to change every day like at the gas station.
Anybody else? Dr. Goodman?
Well, again, I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself. This is in the report that you all put together, which I think is a very good description of the problem. And what your own report says is this is a market where people compete only on price. And I just want to say again, if buyers and sellers only compete on price and nothing else, we're going to get a race to the bottom of all the other features of the product, including reliability. And what I mean by reliability is, the product is there when you need it. And if you sacrifice reliability, you're going to have shortages. And so if I could just take Mark Cuban's plant, for an example, what could you all do to make sure that Mark Cuban is successful with his U.S.-based plant? You could allow him to say, look, the FDA can come by my plant any day of the week, drop of the hat, no prior announcement, and inspect my facility. That doesn't happen in India, doesn't happen in China. So I'm held to a higher safety standard than those guys overseas. And furthermore, I'm going to invest in reliability, so when you come to what does he call it, cost plus drugs, when you come to cost plus drugs online, it's going to be there when you need it. And so if he could say those kinds of things to his consumers, he would be competing in the right way.
So you're saying if the FDA is preventing
Yes.
companies from saying, well,
Yes.
Is that accurate? Dr. Schumann, you can't assess the quality of a drug? There's not information because the FDA just simply doesn't allow you to have the information?
I can't answer the regulatory question. I defer to Dr. Fox. I will say we, as individual doctors and institutions, do not have any way of gauging quality. And the answer for that, I believe Dr. Fox is about to tell us.
Thank you. That's true. Because there's no requirement for any company to list which company even made the drug, where it was made, the sources of raw material, there's no way to assess which company has a good quality record and which company has a bad quality record.
That's a lack of transparency. That's not the FDA saying you
no,
can't say
it. Well, FDA can't share that information. FDA has the information, but legally they can't share.
They have the information about all these drugs?
Most of it.
But they're just not sharing it.
Correct. And Congress could change the labeling law to require drug companies to disclose that. And they could also change the law to allow the FDA to disclose that. But right now, the companies decide what is confidential.
And yet even a lot of the companies don't know where some of this stuff comes from, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chairman Peters, just to add some color to what Dr. Fox shared. When we analyze labels, only 3% of labels actually listed who the active ingredient manufacturer is. So there's very little information in the public domain about who makes these drugs.
But does the company know? They're just and the company knows and the FDA knows, you're telling me? Or we don't know because that's just not really tracked?
Well, the finished dose manufacturer that purchases the active ingredient will know who the active
So they will know. Do they provide that information to the FDA and the FDA is just not telling anybody?
Yeah, Senator, I'd have to, the FDA has certain confidentiality requirements, so that bind them.
So there's also, the report shows that there are multiple layers of manufacturing processes, but that could also create false appearance that there's actually diversity in the suppliers. I think all of you have touched on this. And I think there are 12 FDA-approved manufacturers, fludarabine, which is the one I mentioned here earlier, a critical drug for treating childhood and adult cancers, but only a handful of those approved are actually supplying the drug. So it looks like there's a lot of diversity, but there really isn't. There's just a couple companies out there, and that's lack of transparency. Talk to me about that, why that's a problem, Dr. Fox?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I can look and it looks like there are maybe 6 or 7 suppliers of this product. No problem if we have a shortage because the other companies might be able to make up the difference. But when all of those companies are actually getting their product from just 1 or 2 sources, then we have a false sense of security. And all of that information in your report, which is fantastic, is really not publicly available to anyone at a hospital to do that level of research.
But it is available to the FDA. They have all of that information.
It is, but I don't believe that they can access it well. A lot of that information is buried in PDFs, and it can change. They only get the information once a year as a snapshot in time.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, we've got to dive into these issues. We're going to be talking to all of you more than just what we can cover here with all that's happening today, as well as votes occurring right now, which is why my committee is now all gone, except for me, as they run to vote. But I look forward to working with each and every one of you as we look for some solutions. There's no question that identifying a problem always is easier than identifying solutions, but this committee is about solutions, and we would need your expertise to help us sort this out so that we can deal with this problem. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today.